Hyperion. Hyperion is the tallest tree on Earth, a coast redwood hidden somewhere in California's Redwood National Park. It stands 380.3 feet tall, which is about as high as a 38-story building. The tree was discovered in 2006 by a couple of naturalists who were literally just walking around measuring redwoods when they found it. Before Hyperion, another tree held the record, and before that one, another. So these giants keep getting discovered and dethroned. The exact GPS coordinates are kept secret by park officials because when people know where a famous tree is, they trample the soil around its roots, carve initials into the bark, and generally mess it up. Hyperion is estimated to be between 600 and 800 years old, so it was already massive before America was even colonized. General Sherman. General Sherman is the biggest tree on Earth by volume, a giant sequoia sitting in California's Sequoia National Park. We're talking about a tree that weighs roughly 2.7 million pounds and has been growing for around 2,200 years. To put that weight in perspective, that's heavier than 10 blue whales or about 700 cars stacked up in one organism. The trunk alone measures over 36 feet across at the base, wide enough that if you hollowed it out, you could comfortably fit a small house inside. It stands 275 feet tall, which is respectable for a sequoia but not record-breaking. What makes General Sherman the champion is the sheer mass of wood throughout the entire trunk. Every year it's still adding enough new growth to equal the volume of a whole 60-foot tree, which is wild considering how old it already is. Methuselah. Methuselah is a bristlecone pine that's been standing in California's White Mountains for over 4,850 years. That means this tree was already centuries old when the Egyptians were building the pyramids. Bristlecone pines look ancient too. Gnarled and twisted with sections of dead wood and narrow strips of living bark that spiral up the trunk. They grow at high elevation in harsh conditions, which is actually why they live so long. The cold, dry, windy environment keeps pests and diseases at bay, and the tree grows incredibly slowly, producing dense wood that resists rot. Park rangers keep Methuselah's exact location secret because people used to carve initials into old trees or take pieces as souvenirs. You can hike among bristlecone pines in the area, but you won't know which one is the famous one unless someone tells you. Baobab Avenue. Baobab Avenue sits in western Madagascar along a dusty dirt road between Morondava and Bolani Tsiribihina, and it's basically a lineup of some of the oldest living things you'll ever see. These baobabs, called Adansonia grandidieri if you want the scientific name, are massive bottle-shaped trees that can live well over 800 years, with trunks reaching nearly 100 feet tall and 30 feet across. The avenue has about 24 of these giants standing on both sides of the road, and when you're there at sunset, the whole scene looks almost unreal. The trees store water in their enormous trunks to survive the dry season, which is why they have that swollen, upside-down look. Locals have been farming around these trees for generations, and the baobabs just keep standing there like ancient sentinels watching over the landscape. Dragon blood trees grow on Socotra Island off the coast of Yemen, and they look like something out of a fantasy novel. These trees have this bizarre umbrella or mushroom shape where all the branches grow upward and then fan out into a dense flat canopy at the top. The shape isn't just for show. It actually helps them survive in the dry climate by channeling moisture down to the roots and providing shade to the ground beneath them. If you cut into the bark, the tree bleeds this dark red resin that people have used for centuries as dye, medicine, and even varnish. The locals called it dragon's blood because of the color. The trees can live for hundreds of years and only grow in this one weird pocket of the world where the climate stayed stable enough for them to evolve into these alien-looking things. Rainbow eucalyptus. The rainbow eucalyptus grows naturally in the Philippines and Indonesia, and it's exactly what it sounds like. The bark doesn't stay one color. It peels off in strips throughout the year, and underneath you get these bright patches of green, blue, purple, orange, and maroon all at once. When the bark first sheds, The inner layer is bright green because chlorophyll is right there in the trunk. As that exposed bark ages and gets hit by sun and rain, the green fades into blue, then purple, then orange, and eventually settles into maroon or brown before the next layer peels. Different sections are always at different stages, so the whole trunk looks like someone painted it with every color they had. It's one of the only trees that photosynthesizes through its bark instead of just its leaves. Wisteria tunnel. The Kawachi Fuji Garden in northern Kyushu grows Japanese wisteria, specifically trained over arched metal frames to create living tunnels. When these vines bloom in late April and early May, you walk through what looks like a fantasy world corridor draped in thousands of hanging flower clusters. The blossoms cascade down in long racemes, some stretching over a meter, and they come in shades ranging from deep violet to pale pink to white, depending on the wisteria variety. The garden arranges different colored plants strategically so you move from one color gradient to another as you walk the 100-meter path. The fragrance hits you immediately, this sweet floral scent that fills the tunnel. Sunlight filters through the flowers, creating dappled purple light on the ground. The bloom period only lasts about 2 weeks, and the garden limits daily visitors because it gets absolutely mobbed during peak season. Dark Hedges. The Dark Hedges is this tunnel of beech trees in County Antrim, Northern Ireland that looks like something out of a fairy tale, but the twisted kind. Back in the 1770s, the Stuart family planted about 150 beech trees along the entrance road to their estate to impress visitors heading up to their mansion. Fast forward 250 years and those trees have grown into each other, their branches tangling overhead to form this natural archway that honestly looks a bit sinister. The trunks are gnarled and twisted, the roots bulge out of the ground, and when fog rolls through or the light hits just right, the whole thing takes on this genuinely eerie atmosphere. Game of Thrones filmed a scene here for the King's Road, which makes sense because it already looked like a fantasy setting. These days, it's one of the most photographed spots in Northern Ireland. Chapel Oak. The Chapel Oak in Allouville-Belfos, France, is roughly 800 years old and has 2 tiny chapels carved right into its massive hollow trunk. Someone built the first chapel inside around 1696 after lightning struck the tree and burned out its core, leaving this huge empty space. A local abbot figured the cavity was big enough to work with, so he converted it into a small shrine. Later on, they added a second chapel above the first one, and you reach it by climbing an external wooden staircase that spirals up around the trunk. The lower chapel is called the Chamber of Our Lady and holds maybe 4 people if they squeeze in. The upper one is dedicated to a hermit and is even smaller. People have been visiting this tree as a pilgrimage site for centuries, and it somehow survived the French Revolution when locals slapped a sign on it calling it a temple of reason to keep anti-clerical mobs from chopping it down. Jabuticabera. The Jabuticabera is a tree from Brazil that looks genuinely alien when it fruits, and the reason is simple. The fruits don't grow on branches where you'd expect them. Instead, they sprout directly out of the bark of the trunk and main branches. You end up with a tree that looks like it's covered in dark purple tumors or growths clustered thick on the wood itself. The fruits are small, round, and deep purple to black, almost grape-like, and they push straight through the bark in dense clusters. It's called cauliflory, this whole trunk fruiting thing, and it's rare but not unique to this tree. The fruit is actually edible and pretty popular in Brazil for making jellies and wines, but visually, especially when it's heavy with fruit, the tree looks less like a plant and more like something that belongs in a science fiction movie.